Alright, sailors. This is Underworld Unleashed, part number 2. This is a Martin Quaid crossover event. And I have a lot of bitching to do in this one. But honestly, as far as Martin Quaid stories go, I don't hate this one anywhere near as much as most everything else he has written. The main problem with the entire story, really, is that one of our main characters is being trashed by Martin Quaid. Nice cover here, though. The heroes fighting Neron, the evil demon man. The DC hero who has been put through a ringer in this is Smurf Devil. Smurf Devil is, I would say, he is a minor DC hero. But I would normally get annoyed at anyone calling a character who had a 30-issue long solo series and who has been a member of prominent teams a minor hero. History time. It is history time now, and I actually do like Smurf Devil a fair bit. So let's get into it. Smurf Devil was first published in an issue of Firelord. Firelord 24. He was introduced in a bonus preview included in that issue, and then his own series began. One of the bits of trivia related to Smurf Devil was that he was created for Steve Ditman to draw, but Steve Ditman was not impressed by the character, so turned it down. Smurf Devil, he was a stuntman who created a suit for a movie, the Smurf Devil suit. But he was then trapped inside said suit. His stories were very light-hearted, but as with a lot of the best tongue-in-cheek comedic type of books, the great thing is that you can take Smurf Devil as seriously as you personally want. There is some tragedy there with him being stuck in this condition. It is not a total lark like the later Justice League International material. Some key moments in Smurf Devil history are the debut of this bad guy who goes on to be in Captain Atomant, Suicide Squad, several different iterations of Suicide Squad, and quite a lot of things. We also pay off Smurf Devil's debut in Firelord with a crossover story arc between their two titles. One of my favourite things is his sidekick, Kid Devil. And you all know how badly I want to blast John Jeffries for what he did to Kid Devil. But to get back to Smurf Devil, his series lasted 31 issues. And then he harshly was cast into the abysses of comic book limbo for a full 9 years. Before he had a comeback not too long before this crossover, and he became a Justice League member. I am alright with that. He feels a classic enough hero that I feel he does slot onto a Justice League team quite well without his presence dragging them down. I would have to reread those Justice League issues to re-examine how Smurf Devil is handled in there, but his character really became unstuck in this. The overall plot of this story involves soul selling and dodgy deals with a Satan-like figure. I disagree with the depiction of Smurf Devil in this. Our bad guy, Neron, targeted Smurf Devil, and Smurf Devil's desire that Neron exploited was the selfish want to be a big-name movie star. Smurf Devil's character is being compromised for that, when the far more obvious and less egregious idea would be Neron offering him to be human again. But yeah, Smurf Devil has made a deal with Neron for something utterly vain. And then we have our DC villains who are thrown in with Neron. I do want to go back and address something from part 1. One viewer really took issue with the notion that the Flask bad guys would sell their soul to Satan. These characters, these villains, they have not performed a ritual or summoned Neron. They haven't made a plan to sell their souls to a demon. They haven't sacrificed cattle or carved pentagrams into their ball sacks. What has been happening is a mysterious person has shown up and made them a spurious deal, promising greater power in exchange for their soul. Most of them are agreeing to this because they want the power and they don't put much stock in the idea of a soul. Lenny Luthor, for example, they do show him acknowledge that he doesn't even believe in the soul. So it was an easy agreement for him. And then there's ones like Joker from the hit movie Joker. He don't give a monkey about a soul. But others, like the Flask bad guys, I think they are agreeing to it because they likewise either don't consider it a tangible cost. The soul isn't something that they are physically giving away, or because they believe their souls are already compromised and gone straight to hell. One of the Flask bad guys who avoided the fate of the others is Tricker. He, Smurf Devil, and Captain Marbles, the real one, Biffy Baston, are our main characters here. In the recent years leading up to this crossover, Tricker had been more redemptive, but in this all that really did was ensure that he wasn't there with the other Flask enemies when they were approached by Neron. Tricker, why not? Tricker, he first appeared in the Flask 113. That is him there. He was always one of those goofier bad guys, but there is some unintentional luck present here, because Tricker was also a recurring foil in Smurf Devil series. It makes both of them being picked as major characters in this seem like it has some greater thought beyond Martin Quaid using a Flask bad guy and using a character with devil in their name. The stuff with the bad guys, the main bad guys, is oddly important. Another person in the comments rightfully mistook this as being similar to the Marvel crossover Acts of Vegans, because on the surface you have this group of big bads around a table in charge of things, brought together by a mysterious mystical benefactor. It is very similar, but these bad guys just aren't that relevant to this story. They are underused. They are less relevant in Underworld Unleashed than SeaWorld is in SeaWorld Attacks. Now though, our story has all been set up for us. We have had everything established. So it is time for the DC heroes to get involved and band together. Martin Waid was writing the Flask series. So not only have we had Flask's bad guys play a big role, but now we start the proceedings with the Flask encountering Neron. This is Willie West. I almost forgot I need to point out which Flask is appearing. Neron, he wants souls. They empower him. But what is better than the souls of a dozen villains? The souls of heroes. He tries to tempt Willie West to sell his soul in exchange for returning Barney Allen, the previous Flask, back to life. Willie West rejects it. And one of our main story points is that Neron, he wants the greatest, the most honourable, the most noble soul of all time. We all know, we all assume, the characters, the readers, the script itself, we all anticipate that this most precious soul belongs to Superman. But one of the best things about this crossover is the twist they do with that. I have already effectively spoilt it for you by telling you who the other main character was earlier on. So yeah, his soul is the biggest prize that Neron seeks. We get a lot of scenes like this where Neron approaches heroes and tempts them. Batman here, he tries to convince Batman to sell his soul, and he will bring Jason Donovan back to life. These sort of scenes are the fodder we often see in the Underworld Unleashed tie-in issues. Neron will present himself to a hero and offer them their heart's desire for their soul. They usually reject them. Failing that, he will make a deal with a regular enemy in the series, and they will become more powerful. Simple tie-in stuff, but not the worst crossover concept. This is a story that may have not been written by Martin Waid, but instead is editor August General in Brian. If you don't know that thing, in the 90s at DC, Martin Quaid was often paired with August General in Brian as his editor, and Martin Quaid relied on them to actually write the comics while he took credit for it. Later on, August General in Brian started getting official co-writer credit, but there is a lot of Flask stuff written by Martin Quaid that is either plotted or scripted or totally written by August General in Brian. It was well known. Wizard magazine would even joke about it all the time. This might be another case of that. Even on the credits for these issues, Martin Quaid is only credited with story. He's not listed as a writer, and there is no one credited as a scripter. Martin Quaid is just credited for story. Superboy here. Neron offers him the chance to grow up and become Superman. And we have some of the well done teasing here suggesting Superman is the soul that Neron truly covets. Time for a montage of Neron offering a bunch of heroes stuff and usually being turned down. Among them is Gary Gardner, Lunatic, Pratt's Son, Captain Atamant, Quicksilver, Stephen Hawkman, Rayman, Trump, and Spectre. The last four agreeing to his offer, which presents problems and arguments that they too are being badly written. Well, except for Trump. He is a shit character and an idiot. He can sell his soul as many times as he wants for all I care. Smurf Devil, though, his deal with Neron, turns out it was a monkey's paw wish, as you would come to expect. And the result is that his girlfriend dies. Since I have talked about his history, I want to get into what I don't like about where Smurf Devil goes in and after this. Smurf Devil's main starring role is a few years later in Shady Pact, and that series is fine. But between that and this, we start to have Smurf Devil become literally a devil. He is no longer trapped inside an exoskeleton movie costume that looks like a devil. He is transformed into an actual devil. This completely betrays any of the light-hearted fun of the original character. And even worse, in my opinion, is poor Kid Devil. Colossal idiot and barely literate arsehole John Jeffries transforms Kid Devil into a literal Kid Devil because he cannot fucking understand that names can be symbolic or simply just a name. Kid Devil gans from being a sweet kid to being an edgy, dark, smoking teenager who sold his soul. And fuck that. Fuck John Jeffries. I might surprise you, but in terms of their work and their comics, I think John Jeffries is significantly worse than Martin Quaid. I'm not saying Martin Quaid is brilliant, but even compared to John Jeffries' crossover events, this I feel is better composed and more logical. This is a much better crossover. It is a much better story. Characters are not being maimed and beaten to bloody pulps. It is heroes versus a bad guy threat. And that is a better comic book story than something that is John Jeffries shaking the cage of the DC universe because he can. We have Green Lanterns here, the Kyle Reese version. He fights Neron. And this fight is good, and it is also surprisingly long. I like that these scenes aren't simply rinse and repeating this. Someone like Flask or Batman, they rejected Necron quickly, and, well, Kyle Reese rejected him quickly too, but then we have this entire fight. If you are wanting a Marvel story or series to compare this to for whatever reason, I would say that it has the most in common with the Satan series from the 80s, the Al Milburn one, Satan versus Fantastic Force, Satan versus Extra Factors, Satan versus etc. This is like a better story version of that. After some scenes with the bad guys and their plotline being rather quickly resolved, we have Green Lanterns after his fight summoning the Justice League and a big roster of DC heroes. This is usually always my favourite part of DC crossovers, when you have all the heroes together. It is before this scene that most of the tie-ins take place, and I will look at one tie-in issue, at least one. But with all the heroes together, they decide to leave about 80% of them behind and only make use of a very compact unit to go and confront Necron. This crossover is only 3 issues long. I don't think I had said so before, but when I read it for the first time, I thought it was like 5 issues. And we were still in the opening gambit of the story here. But we are actually entering the 3rd and final part. There are a lot of tie-ins to Underworld Unleashed. But like with most crossovers, the tie-ins, or some of them, dilute the main story too much. In an ideal world, the tie-ins should flesh out and bolster what is otherwise quite a short story here. Tie-ins offer an expansion on the core story would have been a good thing, but a lot of them are the basic tie-ins that you can easily imagine. This is a Martin Quaid comic, and I'm not only giving it 7 thumbs up, but I'm not ripping it to shreds. Maybe Martin Quaid sold his soul to Necron so that I would review one of his comics as being, at worst, mediocre.